We take on the darkness, stare down deceit. Murder in the headlines, justice in the beat. From cold case whispers to killers in disguise, we rip off the mask, expose all the lies. Facts like bullets reload and deliver. Truth cuts deep like a blade in a river. Corruption shakes when the mic goes live. We dig where others won't survive. James rolling through the smoke. Truth hits hard, no time for a joke. Deceit, murder, we name every name. No restraint, no shame, just flame. Locked on the case, we investigate. Cold files heat up when we penetrate. The only source you'll ever need. 12 gauge investigate. We make them bleed. No games, no censors, just truth. Justice is loud, and we're the sound. This is 12 gauge paper.
This is 12 Gauge Investigative. Let's jump in.
All right. How's everybody doing on this Sunday, Memorial Day weekend? I hope everybody's doing great. My name is 12 Gauge and welcome to my channel, 12 Gauge Investigative. I hope everybody has been doing good this weekend and that you have had the ability to be with family and friends and loved ones. And if you haven't, well, thank you for coming into the chat. You know, today I wanted to talk about a lot of things that I've been hearing on these YouTube streets. You know, there's times when you just ask yourself, at what point does reality mix with fiction? And at what point are people going to finally let go of their insanity? And I'm not saying anything about insanity, kind of like insanity, like they don't know what's right and wrong. I'm talking about how they use so much of their energy to prove something that is unprovable. And like I've always said, more power to people to do that. But you know what? At a particular point, you have to ask yourself, how is that logical? I want to start with the Dylan Bethany theory. And you know, I've heard countless streams on this one, and I'm not trying to debunk it, but I'm trying to just throw some logic in on it. Hello, everybody in the chat. Thank you for being here. Happy Sunday to you guys. You know, the Dylan and Bethany debacle that many people seem to not understand is, these are some of the questions that many people say. They say, well, how could Dylan have went by Xana on her way downstairs and not stopped to help her? Well, let's look at this both ways. One, if you're looking at the transcript and you're looking at this in a mental capacity that you're able to articulate words and understanding of human nature as a 19-year-old child, you know, you're going to see that this individual was scared. Her phone was dying. So she was heading downstairs to her friend / roommate's safety. So she saw Xana on the floor and didn't stop Probably because she thought, you know what, Dana's passed out. Hunter's in there. If anything happens, he'll yell. We'll come up and help. Really, it's not your responsibility to take care of your roommates. No matter how ethical it may sound or unethical it may sound, it's not anybody's duty to stop and render aid at any position. It's not against the law, and there is the Good Samaritan law that allows, if you do and the person ends up passing away, you won't be liable for trying to save their life. But that's one of the major issues that I see in this whole scenario. You can't make other things fit, so therefore you're going to attack the surviving victims. You know, had it been totally the other way around, had it been Kaylee and Maddie surviving this and Dylan and Bethany, and they not come down because they're on the third floor for 8 hours and not go knocking on their doors or anything, and they hear all this melee that's going on, would people have still been bashing them as hard for not calling 911 in the middle of the night? I agree with you. She was probably scared and didn't know that they were playing a prank on her. Even, you know, if she wasn't sure it was a prank, you know, we all have been there. We all have been there to the point where we say, there's somebody else, let them take care of it. And, you know, I've heard people say, well, she's selfish, she's narcissistic, she's all about herself. Do you ever ask yourself at what point that how brave this person really was by putting herself in this investigation? She could have said, I don't want to answer any questions. I'm going to get with my lawyer. But she didn't. She gave up a lot of information. Their phones gave up a lot of information. But yet people want to call them selfish for not calling 911 for 8 hours. How is that selfish? If you're 19 years old, 21 now, but 19 years old at the time of the crime, and all this stuff is going on, and, you know, you do the best you can with what you have at that moment. You know, we've had people talk about how she should have, they should have known that she was dead. They should have known with all the blood that was seen. That's insinuating your own logic that blood was seen. You know, you may see blood in 9 out of 10 crimes, but what about that one time you don't see blood? So does that mean that they were lying? Does that mean that they're liars? Because that's what a lot of people have called them, liars. They've called them conspirators in the crime of murder and quadruple homicide. They've called them every name under the book. They have attacked their families. They have attacked people that knew them. So let's lay off Dylan and Bethany because we don't know, honestly, what happened that night other than what we've read, what we've heard. And it's interesting to me that the people that are most vocal about what they should have done are middle-aged men. I very seldom hear other female creators talking about what these two should have done. I don't. The one that I hear bashing them the most are middle-aged men talking about what they should have done and how they should have handled it and stuff like that. What do you think, chat? Do you think they handled it inappropriately? Do you think that she did that as she was running by on purpose? Do you really believe that Dylan, in her mind, thought, oh, Xana's dead, let me just run on by. I've seen more than I need to see. Do you think that she actually had something to do with this? What do y'all think? Y'all help me out here. And by the way, I'm not on a computer or my laptop. I'm on my phone, so I'm doing the best I can with this StreamYard. It's not the easiest, but they've made it a little easier to do this from your phone, which is kind of cool. As you answer that, and we do have a couple answers down at the bottom, one of them says, also, aren't we talking about a decision made in minutes? Exactly. Also, they come up with all kinds of excuses and reasons for Brian and not for Dylan. Very true. Very true. You know, there's no way that murder could have happened in 19 minutes or however time there was, 15 minutes. But yet, Dylan conspired to kill her roommates. Get this is the newest one. It was um, a love triangle between Dylan, Kaylee, Maddie that went wrong. I don't think so either, Firefly. I don't. I don't believe that. I never really will. But I heard this the other day about a love triangle between the girls, and that's how come there was such viciousness because Dylan was mad because she was in love with Kaylee and Maddie was in the way and she wanted Kaylee, and so she ended up killing not only the person she wanted, but the person in the way. Is that usually how that happens? As much true crime as we listen to, we ever hear that happening where I love you both, but I'm going to kill, or not I love you both, I love one of you. One of you's in the way, so I'm going to kill both of you. You know, there's one that recalled in my mind about a case here in Texas where there was a dental assistant and a dentist. The dentist was the new girlfriend of the other dentist, and the dental assistant was dumped, and she was jealous because she wasn't with that person anymore, so she conspired to hire two people to help her kill this dental assistant. She didn't kill the dentist because you wouldn't kill the person that you're in love with. You would kill the person that you supposedly view as in a way because you want to see their pain, you want to see their hurt. They might kill themselves, you know. Firefly says, yeah, in the mind blowing, how is every excuse in the book for BK, especially with so much circumstantial evidence? I'm tired of people asking for a motive too. A psychopath doesn't need a motive. That's 1,000% correct. It really is. Do you need a motive like school shooters? You know, people that just wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to go kill a bunch of people. Let me load up my gun. Let me load up my ammunition and let me go. In the same breath, we can ask for the freaking alibi. They want a motive. How about an alibi? How about you give us an alibi we can work with within the judicial process that makes absolute sense, that clears him where he doesn't need some other expert to try to determine that his alibi is feasible. How about that? What's wrong with that? You get what I'm saying? It's like You need to do this, you need to do that. Well, Brian doesn't need to defend himself at all. Okay, then what one-sided judicial process is going on here? Like, I mean, they've been asking for that alibi for a multitude of hearings, and that's the best he can do. You would believe that he would be able to put himself somewhere where somebody could vouch for him, other than to rely on an expert person to show the court this is where his phone was. But supposedly his phone was off. So how is that going to work? You get what I'm saying? A lot of people say, see, that doesn't make sense. Of course it doesn't make sense. But multitudes of people go to great lengths to show you how it does make sense. It's pretty obvious why this BS is going, and to me, it's because they have to keep this story going. They want to know what evidence in BK's, so where's the evidence on Dylan? Of course. Getting back to Dylan, people say Kaylee would have beat the heck out of Dylan. Okay. I don't believe, I mean, honestly, think about this. If Dylan goes in with a K-bar and she starts to attack Maddie first, Kaylee wakes up. You don't think that's startling and jumping at Dylan is going to wake Maddie up to the point where they both start to fight her? Even if Maddie is stabbed, she's not dead unless she does one fatal jab, you know? And then I agree at that point, we probably have a bunch of screaming. We probably do have a bunch of yelling. And then the other two, Ethan and Dana, come upstairs and assist. That's more likely how it would have happened. It wouldn't have happened like Dylan was bigger, so she was able to overcome these two in the bed. They make her sound like an Amazon woman. Like she was so much bigger than BK. Where, she was almost his height. So think about that. Those people that say that Brian couldn't have done it, if they're almost identical in height, how come Brian couldn't have done it? Almost identical in weight. How come Brian couldn't have done it? When you're asked or you're giving descriptions on that, you're always saying how frail and how brittle Brian is. And there's no way that Brian could have done it because of his ASD or whatever. But yet, you want to put Dylan in that place? It just doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me. Because it's not logical. Occam's razor, as they always go to, it's the least restrictive process in the crime. So you got a perpetrator coming into the house from the backslider. That makes a whole hell of a lot more sense than somebody who's still in the house. The only way that way makes sense is you're excluding the two roommates, the two survivors, and saying that they lied about the intruder and that they fabricated it or they opened up the slider for somebody. Well, now we're saying that Dylan opened up the slider for the killer if the door wasn't even locked. Why would she need to do that? And there's not enough said about Bethany in order to really implicate her in a lot, other than the text messages and a 911 call. But let's get back to Dylan, okay? I was saying she walked by Dana's room on the way downstairs. to Bethany's room because her phone was about to die. She gets downstairs. They're talking about it. You read the documents. If you haven't, you need to because they're quite interesting. And it's a detailed account on what happened, moment by moment almost. Well, they get down there and then they call people, they text people, they check websites, they do all kinds of stuff, probably even sleep off and on because they just don't know what's going on. But they're probably less concerned of being able to see in Xana and Ethan's room as she was passing because you could see that Xana was on the floor. She didn't see Ethan, but she probably didn't go over there either, as far as we know. So she could tell that at least that room was okay because you could see inside of it. There wasn't any kind of issues going on there. I mean, people say she heard whimpering and crying. Why didn't she go help? Have you ever been around a severe drunk person? There's a lot of whimpering and there's a lot of crying. What's up, Aaron? There's a lot of whimpering and crying. Do you love me? You don't love me. All that stuff. Both from males and females. I've seen males cry just the same as females because it lowers your inhibitions. So crying and whimpering was probably not the first time she'd ever heard that in that house living there. But like I'm saying, she walks by, she sees her on the floor. That's nothing unusual. I've seen multitudes of friends on the floor from across the room in drunken stupors. You know, it's like, but we want to make her a killer so badly. We put all this stuff that we would have thought in her position. Mind you, once again, these are middle-aged men talking about a 19-year-old girl. Let that rock into your head a little bit. Middle-aged men stating what they would have done or they would have seen or what they would have thought. How does a middle-aged man even have the capacity to convince anybody that they know what a 19-year-old girl would have been thinking, feeling, or even having the capacity to do? Chad, answer me that. Answer me that question. Riddle me that, Batman. I'd like to see what y'all's comments are on that because there's a panel of middle-aged men that I see, and they all have solutions for what a 19-year-old girl should have, would have, and could have done. Can y'all riddle me that? How does a middle-aged man have the capacity to understand what a 19-year-old girl would be feeling, doing, or any of that? But they do try to be convincing. I give them that. You know, and then she get down there, they do the whole thing. You've heard it all, the 8-hour gap. They call Ethan and his girlfriend Emily over. Ethan and Emily and Dylan and Bethany start up the stairs. First thing Ethan does is go to the kitchen and grab a knife. Why did he grab a knife? What was he scared of? Okay. You just heard a story from probably one of the survivors, and they are survivors. They are victims. No matter what you feel, whatever your grown ass man heart tells you, they are surviving victims. You know, play tough for the camera all you want, but they are surviving victims. One of you said some very outlandish stuff on his stream about lighting fire to the victims or something, or to the four, and not giving a damn. And people eat that up. They eat that content up because you're spitting facts. No, you're spitting ignorance. But I give you a little bit of a pass only because you're on the spectrum. But that doesn't mean that you still should not watch what you say. You want us to be lenient with Brian because he has ASD and he couldn't possibly do this or that, but you're on the spectrum and you're able to spit out all this violence and anger and objectivity of women and all this other stuff. But we shouldn't judge Brian on his capability of doing that as well. How does that work, honestly? I'll digress. So they're walking through the kitchen. He grabbed the knife for protection. He has 3 girls behind him, okay? He's the male. That's what any male in America would and should do, is protect those he cares about. So he grabbed a knife. He's probably sweeping around where he can see. Why didn't he go upstairs? Why didn't he walk into the room and see all the blood? Well, he did. Do you remember the 911 call? The unrehearsed 911 call, the one that you call a drama rehearsal? She wasn't even crying. She could cry on cue. Give me a break. Give me a break. You know, the fact that you can brainwash so many people into believing what you say, it's just remarkable to me. Because I believe that you can't brainwash people who don't even pay attention to you. And that's a natural fact right there. I think that we other creators who are on this side of logic have an understanding that when people fill up your chat that they're actually listening to you. But I've seen enough in those chats that people don't really listen. They ask questions, but they don't really listen. They're wanting you to interact with them, but you're not interacting. You're just spewing your 2.5-year-old garbage with a little twist and covering yourself by being able to say, well, I'm still on the fence. I'll let you know once the trial gets here. What a cop-out. Stand behind your words. If you can get on here and time again spew this garbage, then you can stand behind your words. Stand behind your stance. I've stood behind mine for 2.5 years. Never deviated. You know, I've said, the man does deserve to be having a fair and impartial trial, and he doesn't need to be let go on technicality. If he is the one and the jury thinks so, then let them do their job. If he's not the one and the jury thinks so, let them do their job. I'm not going to be on the jury. I'm not going to be in the courtroom. This man is not my hero. This man is not someone that I look up to. This man has so many things against him that it's going to be a tough time proving that he wasn't there, he wasn't culpable of it, and that his mindset was not at a pattern that could have conceivably taken him to commit this crime. So let's keep going, shall we? They get the knife, they sweep around, he goes into... Let me stop right there. The reason he went into Xana in Ethan's room, I presume, is due to the fact that their door was open. He could see in there. And obviously he saw one of his friends laying on the ground. So he's investigating from the noises that Dylan heard the night before that she probably told him about. So he's investigating. He tells them to stay behind a little bit. We've all heard this, read it. He gets closer and he probably does see the blood at that point. He might even see the slash marks on her. And I believe that whenever he yells, get out, that's when he glances over and sees his best friend bleeding out or have bled out all over the bed. And that's when everybody ran downstairs, called 911. But he didn't tell the girls that he saw blood. It wasn't written in the document. It wasn't. So how can somebody see all that blood and not react? Well, technically, none of the girls saw the blood. Ethan was the only one that saw the blood. And he reacted. The fact that he didn't say blood, if you're smart enough to know that there was blood in that room when somebody gets stabbed or cut or knifed or whatever you want to call it, then you would know there'd be blood. Would you really need somebody to relay that info to you? You got to ask yourself these questions, man, because people act like they need play by play. And if it's not included in there, then it didn't happen. There's no critical thinking going on. And there's a lot of individuals that claim to have critical thinking skills, but yet they still ask the dumbest questions when it comes to these cases. When it comes to this scenario, then they fill in the blanks with, well, it must have been this because I didn't hear about the blood. Aaron, you got me on that one, bro. I don't need play by play because in my mind, I'm logical enough to know, okay, he walked in, he screamed like that, he's gonna see blood. He sees his best friend all sliced up. Supposedly his legs were carved. I mean, come on, man. You know? YouTube will only let you go so far as, you know, describing certain things. I don't really need the play by play, but I'm just talking about like if it's not there, then people are always painting the least logical reason. They very seldom go to the most obvious reason. I believe there are, Rondi. She said, are there really so many people that have not been in serious, dangerous situations? I believe that there are. Because there's a lot of individuals that don't believe that certain things do happen to other people, even though they do watch these true crime shows day in and day out. They believe that Bill Curtis and what that Dateline dude, they lie when they talk about it. You know what I mean? People want to argue about things that don't matter, like whether or not Kaylee was sleeping in her bed or Maddie's, so was found in Maddie's. So, yeah. Let's not make it as horrendous as it is, and there was 4 victims. So let's get to the 911 call. There's a lot of confusion and interjection. I've even heard that one of the victims' fathers was downstairs choreographing the call, interjecting his words. Do I believe that? No. But that's how outlandish it's getting. Where You place a victim father choreographing a phone call that in your mind didn't even happen. Because in your mind, they're not dead and they're in witness protection program. Yes, happy birthday, Madison May Mogan. Happy heavenly birthday. We would rather you be here with us than to have to wish you a happy heavenly birthday. And may God watch over your family and the one that loved you. You know, to keep bashing Steve Gonsalves, and the family, just ludicrous as bashing the surviving roommates. It is. But yet you act like you don't live in a glass house. Once again, middle-aged men bashing these young girls, acting like they don't live in a glass house or have never thrown a stone. It's just terrible. Just terrible. So, let's put this to rest. Steve was not there. There was sirens heard. And there was blood in the room. And Ethan saw it most likely. And you say 12, how do you know that? Because 12's not a fucking idiot, that's why. The least possible scenario of resistance would say that if there was a crime that happened in that room, there would have been blood from the crime that involved a sharp-edged weapon. So challenge me on that or give me your best impression, but bring facts. How do you dispel it? Were you there? Do you have crime scene photos that nobody's ever seen? Where there's no blood and there's no bodies and it's just an empty room? How do you hang on to your ability to state what you want, which is, free speech, and I stand behind that. But also with free speech, we must have at times evidence of our stance. Otherwise, it's just conjuncture. Hearsay. We get to the 911 call. We hear everything that's said. We are able to have that understanding. Dylan wants to tell the operator exactly what happened. Yeah, I don't know what I said. Yeah, thank you, you two bad actors. Yeah, I don't know what I said. I'm on this phone and I can't but if I said somebody else, thank you for correcting me for that. But yeah, Hunter saw no blood. He saw plenty of blood, I'm sure. I'm sure he did. Also, it's interesting. Yeah, I meant to say Hunter. Yeah, God, thank you for that. I'm glad you're here. I enjoy your videos. Um, it's interesting to me that once the 911 call was over, and the investigation officially began, it's people just could not stop talking about the investigation, about how people weren't investigating this properly. And they were setting up their narrative about the police fumbling the investigation and not doing what they were supposed to and cross-contaminating. And all those kids that went in that house and cross-contaminated. Well, guess what? There's still people now that are praising Kim, WSU Kim, or she has another name. Something Carter. I can't think of the first name. Something Carter that she goes by in the comments. Now they're praising her, saying she got everything right. And that's not true. That's not true. She didn't get everything right. Let's go back to some of the silliness that Kim had to say, or I can't even think of her first name that she uses. Something Carter. Ruth Carter. That's what it is. Ruth Carter is WSU Mom Kim. So if you see her comments in, these people's pages, that's WSU Mom Kim. So let's say one of the specific that just jumps out to me. She said very early on that there was a plumber from University of Idaho that had a pipe wrench to supposedly beat Ethan with the pipe wrench. He was tortured in the kitchen with the pipe wrench. And she also said that people started gathering around 8:30 in the morning. People gathering around. The policeman showed up and there was only one muffled voice that said, dead. Okay. Have we read that anywhere in the documents? Has that been put out anywhere in the documents? I've yet to hear that, see it, read it, because I do read these documents, So before I kind of felt foolish by talking about stuff without going and reading it. So I just started reading these documents to see exactly what was real and what was fabricated. We haven't heard about that either. It won't be a matter of time before they bring Dot back into the mix. And they'll bring Dave back into the mix. Because we still got a long way to go before we get to the trial. And people are digging for any irrelevant piece of dirt that they can find to put a pulse through to make it relevant again. How people are back at the grub truck and they're back at Linda Lane. Hey, Mickey. They're back all over the place other than where I've never seen a creator that does not believe that Brian did this. They never talk about the house in a way other than to dispel how Brian could have possibly done it. One of the biggest ways was that 6-inch step. They would have said, well, that would have made Brian almost 9 feet tall. He would have tripped on that step going up and down. There's no way he could have done it. Well, if you're 5'10" on a level higher than you, and then when you step down, you're still going to be 5'10", right? So she supposedly saw him within 3 feet of her, walking by her. So yeah, he saw her. She saw him. People want to just bring in their sophistication into this. And yard dog, as I call it, where that dog is just yapping his ass off after every little movement. They want to yard dog it. It's kind of like if I had a co-host and they were a little more smarter than I, or they had a little more information. Let's say I had Nina up here, right? And let's say I didn't believe with Nina. You know me well enough. I'd be like, Nina, nah, that's not something that I agree with. But if I agree with her, I'm going to be like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But not everything she would say that I didn't agree with, I would be claiming that it was true. You know, adults are able to disagree. And I don't respect wine drinking males who drink a wine out of a wine glass. You know, if I was a drinker, I'd be a Jack and Coke man straight out of the cup. Maybe right out of the bottle. But anybody who tells you that they drink wine out of a wine glass and want to be taken seriously and have so much to say about a 19-year-old girl, as the clown says, that's sus to us. You get what I'm saying? Hey, Texas. Hey, Bullets. Hey, Firefly. Yeah, it takes you 2 bottles of wine to get a little buzz and get some balls. Because otherwise, when you're sober, you don't have those silver balls. You know, it's like, okay, whatever it takes, bro. You're still an idiot on so many levels. But regardless, yep, that's sus to us. But we get back to the supposed killer. The individual was dressed all in black. We've had individuals from day one talking about certain scenarios that could possibly be true. What do y'all think on the fireman view that she could have had about this guy? Yes, exactly, Mickey. What do you think about? Do you think that she could have confused the balaclava for, you know, what those firemen wear? Those, you know, so they don't burn their faces as they're going into a fire. They have the fire hat, you know, and everything else. I'm not a fireman, never been one, but, you know, I've seen a bunch of fireman movies and they all have to, you know, they take the hat off. They have that balaclava looking thing on. And they usually have like suspender looking things and, you know, dressed all in a color. Yeah, flash guard. You're right. Oh, I'm just talking about how certain creators across the internet have their vivacious imagination regarding this case. And I'm just talking logic versus fiction. You know what I mean? Yeah, the flash guard. I mean, if you saw somebody in a balaclava, wouldn't that look like a flash guard to you? I mean, it's all black, but are you going to say, she probably said mask, because that's what they said. But once again, she could have pled the fifth and not said a damn thing. And then people would have been even more mad at her. But she gave us descriptions. Description nobody else who lived in that house was able to give. Bethany wasn't able to tell us there was whimpering and crying and somebody's here. And, you know, unless she heard these things and collaborated with her and said, hey, did you hear anything? Well, I just heard a little bit of whimpering, or maybe I heard a little bit of crying, or maybe I heard this. I mean, did it really make a difference who heard it? As to there was somebody in the house that heard this stuff that survived? Yeah, respect to all firemen. That brings me to I saw a George Strait cover band the other night and they sang that song The Fireman and I started laughing. And if you know George Strait, you know. They call me the fireman. That's my name. Been going all over town putting out old flames. If If you know, you know. But regardless, it's just terrible. It's just terrible how these people are portrayed who actually lived through this versus the individuals who obviously are hanging on to memories of whatever. I mean, can you imagine if you stopped listening to anything about this and you started investing in another case, and then 6 months from now, you come back to it? How much are you going to really remember of this case other than where you left off, right? So if you listen to a lot of people, you can tell that either they moved on with something different and they really only remember what was relevant at the time of the heightened era of reporting this crime. Those that have the updated stuff and are able to talk about different things like that, you can tell that they actually research it probably on a daily, on an hourly, or on a minute to minute thing. And that's understandable. That's like, respect those people more than I respect those that just sit there and put the documents up there and read them and don't even describe them to their audience. I'm sitting in the audience going, okay, what are you going to say about this? Tell me about the document. Give me your impression. But they don't give you anything. They just give you an audible book. As you're sitting in there waiting for the meat and potatoes of it, and you don't get anything. Kind of a letdown to me, but, who am I? Oh, I feel like going and riding a motorcycle today for some reason. The point is, no one went to bed that night with murder anywhere on their mind. Of course not, Mickey. You're so right on that. I like that comment. They didn't. They did not. You know? They did not. And also to think about is there's been new rehashment of the camera footage where Maddie, what did you say to Adam? Like I told Adam everything. People are still interjecting that little piece right before all that. It's kind of inaudible to some, and some people actually hear what he says. What Jack Showalter says. I've never been able to really hear what he says, but either way, it seems like he was hanging around and then he left. After they left, they were at a grub truck waiting on some food, and they ran into a lot of people they knew. Maddie was, all over the place. Hey, PKC. Happy Memorial Day. She was all over the place. And then they went home. And we didn't have this little bit of information. Once they stopped calling Jack, or no, hold on a second. It was 2 to 2:56. So when they were in Kaylee's room, all huddled together, they obviously were talking whatever. They were going to go back out to the grow truck, but they decided against it. That's what the documents state. So what did they do? The others went about their business. Dana and Ethan weren't home yet. So what does Kaylee and Maddie start doing? They start calling Jack. D. Are unable to get him. Maddie calls him 3 times. And probably they say, you know what? Screw this. Let's go to bed. They go to bed. Supposedly. The other girls are, there's no more movement until about 4 o'clock. But people want to put so much between 2:50 something and 4 a.m. You know what I mean? It's interesting, though. It is interesting. I'm not trying to say that people shouldn't have interests and people shouldn't have questions. I'm just talking about the individuals that go too far, in my opinion. When you start bashing families, when you start bashing surviving roommates and talking gibberish, I'm going to call you an idiot. Whether you deserve it or not in your eyes. Oh, you could think I'm an idiot. That's fine with me. I'm not here to prove one way or the other to you. But I'm not drinking either, so that kind of makes you an idiot if you're drunk talking crap, you know? But anyways, Esperanza, welcome. I'm glad you decided to pop in on our channel for the first time. I'm so glad to see you. Hope you keep coming back. And I'm being very lackadaisious today, and I'm using a lot of wording that I usually don't use, so don't let that scare you off if you do the replay crew. You know, some people enjoy that. I don't usually do it, but today I'm just not in that mindset. You know, I just thought I'd hop on here you get tired of hearing stuff that just sounds so ridiculous. Like it would be coming from a defense perspective. He didn't go out the back slider. He went back through Kaylee's room, opened that slider, and shimmied down a bed sheet. And instead of running back up the hill to his car, he climbed up each and every tree and walked across the bigger limbs so nobody would see him. And he jumped into his car from the biggest tree there. And that really wasn't his car that we saw driving away at a fast rate of speed. That was the souls of the four escaping. And that's what the camera saw. I hate to I hate to break it to y'all, but there was a white Elantra. I've watched that footage a million times trying to clear that up, and there's no way to do it. But, that is just, it's ignorance or just lack of accountability, one or the other, whatever you want to say. It's like, and then when he came back that morning, he had already changed clothes into his church clothes, so he was able to walk in without anybody being none the wiser. Walked in, realized that everything was still the same as he left it, and he walked out, clicked his heels 3 times, and ended up back at Steptoe. That's how it happened. And then he took the thumbs up picture, not because of his top button. Somebody had the audacity to say that I was making fun of autistic people because I put the little backdrop that said, this is how button a top button. Then he gets back to Steptoe. He's taking the thumbs up photo. He's not thumbs upping because he just killed somebody. He's thumbs upping because he just had the best breakfast he'd ever eaten. And he was able to tie his shoes correctly this time. Not the top button. He tied his shoes correctly. No more Velcro for Bry. The man is on a mission. The man is on a mission. This is how it sounds every day in, day out. And then they intertwine satanic rituals and witchcraft and shadows and blurred images of. I saw one on Facebook the other day, and it was showing what looked like red smeared blob of something and then a white blob of something, and the caption said, "See, this is them carrying the bodies back to 1122." My question to you is this: where did all the blood go? How would you be able to get rid of all that blood and nobody see you? How would you be able to get rid of all that blood and nobody see you? Exactly, Firefly. I get you. I'm just being facetious. Nina has been on panel with me multitudes of times where we discuss blood spatter and cleanup and all this other stuff. And I know that they've had experts on these documents that come out and say that there could potentially be a cleanup. And I'm sure we'll find one way or the other in the trial if there was and who did it or who could have potentially did it. So if there's blood running towards your room or even running down the hall, isn't it almost human instinct to want to clean that up? Because we're getting to watch this. No, we're getting to watch this after the fact, not during the crime, not the next morning, not the 8 hour gap. You know, we're getting to watch it after the crime. So it's easier to critique. It's easier to say, well, this is probably what happened because this happened, this happened, this happened. But we don't know for fact that everything that we're assuming took place. It sounds good. And once again, there's nothing wrong with having that train of thought. Just don't get nasty about it. Because it doesn't mean that it's factual. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean that it's factual or you can base it on any kind of reality. Don't get nasty about it. Didn't he break into the chem lab? He had cleanup chemicals. Why would he? I understand what you're talking about, but let's look at this. If we're Mickey, you and I are standing next to the people that said that, why would you break into a chemical lab rather than the maintenance shop or the janitor's closet? Why did it have to be a chemical lab? It's almost like everything has to have the descriptive names in order to push the narrative. You get what I'm saying? He broke into the biohazard chemical forensic lab where he found no blood cleanup materials whatsoever. He did find beakers, flask, and stirs, but no cleanup materials. So he ended up having to go back down the hall into the janitor's closet, where there in the back corner was the blood cleanup spill kit. Yeah. And there, folks, is the rest of the story. Hello, typically unique. Happy Memorial Day. No, he's not. No, he's not. But you know what? People attempt to make him a genius who think they're geniuses. That's what it is. It's like we're going to live We're going to live vicariously through this dude, even though we don't think he did it. We're still going to make it sound good how he couldn't have done it. The worst thing I've heard with the cannibalism theory, I'm a peace loving person, but I lost it on the creator that allowed it on this show. To me, that's totally sick individuals, of course. And that's why I'm going after a little bit those individuals on that panel you're talking about, because he's just gotten worse with added people on his panel that have no sense of dignity whatsoever. Well, that sucks. I hate going to the laundry net too. Jeff H., how you doing, buddy? Hope you're eating a good Memorial Day cookout meal. They say there's no proof that his car in the video circling its prey, yet it was there exactly in the correct time frame. The clocks were off, didn't you know? Those camera clocks weren't even set right. Oh, and his phone just happened to be disconnected at the perfect time. I get you. I get you wholeheartedly on that. See, my whole thing, like I was talking about earlier, you know, yeah, PKC. You can't believe the owners of the grub truck didn't have the lawsuits brought up on that one. They still have to prove that phone was off. Yeah. My whole factual thing in my mind is if you have an alibi, give me your alibi where it doesn't include another person having to be an expert to show me you were at a place. You know, he could have stopped and got gas at the Shell on the way out of Pullman. I don't even know if there's a Shell, but he could have stopped, got gas, flirted with the attendant, and took off. There's his alibi. You know? It's like, and on the way back, stopped at 5 different places. You just have to have reliability of a witness stating that you're at where you say that you're at. That's all an alibi is. Like, okay, instead of saying, okay, I supposedly turned my phone off at 2:54, wasn't turned back on until 4:38-ish, somewhere around there. So whether you believe he was there or not, doesn't that sound suspicious to you? And of all the cars, I mean, like, we've seen the camera footage on King Road, Queen Road. Supposedly, there was no other cars circling that house. There was no other cars on that video footage that we saw. He wasn't behind the DoorDash driver. He wasn't behind the ice cream truck. He wasn't behind any of that. It was just a vehicle that resembled a white Elantra. So, you know, I just don't get how it's so difficult, even if you don't believe it was him, how you could not see that these pieces don't match up. And I'll be the first to say, when it first started, I wasn't sure that this whole scenario that they pushed out was legit. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't. I was a skeptic. And I was jumping from chat to chat, trying to get them to show me exactly what they knew and how I was going to make up my mind. And I was going to say, well, this didn't make sense and that didn't make sense. And what about this? And I kept thinking to myself, you know what? You got to stick to a side or you're going to drive yourself crazy. And it just kept getting wilder and wilder. And then I kept checking off channel just because of it. I thought to myself, you know what? I'll make my own channel. I'll make my own channel. How about the guy he almost ran over getting out of the neighborhood? You don't think that he had a good view of the car? You might not believe that the camera footage got it right, but you can't tell me you almost get ran over by a vehicle. You're not going to remember what damn car almost ran you down. And you might be quick enough to get the license plate. You know what I mean? The 5 a.m. guy was getting picked up for church. God. I was thinking that, like, what are the odds somebody's coming around that area and damn, here comes a flying ass car at you where it almost clips you, and you're like, you go from, let's say he was not even drinking, or if he was, you go from drunk to sober really quick, and you're like, wow, yes sir, that was definitely an Elantra, and I saw his bushy eyebrow hanging out the window. He almost hit me with it. You know, we heard that on Dateline. You know, we heard that on Dateline. Jeff H says, I think it's interesting that the 4:23 a.m. vehicle leaving can be returning 2 hours later at the same parking spot. Carrying a child out of the car that appears to be sleeping. Black truck leaving house direction also around 4:30ish. Where would the black truck at though? I didn't see a black truck on that video. Not meaning that it didn't happen, but I'm just saying I don't remember seeing the black truck. But also, can you maybe so, maybe that the informant. Maybe that's the informant. Never know. But what are the odds? This dude had some bad luck that night. That was the worst night to commit this crime if he was the one. Not only was there a hit and run out not close, not far from his house. So he chanced that. It's like God was showing him all kinds of signs. Don't do it. Don't do it. Not me, but God, I'm out of here. I'm going to do this. All right, my son, you're on your own. Then he gets into town and there's more cops leaving the direction not long before you actually got there. Drunk kids all over the place. They still have their lights on. Darn the luck you didn't think about the 1112 camera or the A&W camera or the camera on Ridge Road or the camera at Linda Lane. Darn the luck. It's like you're going into almost like a dead end to commit a crime, hoping that nobody sees you pulling into the dead end and pulling out. I mean, there's so many vehicles that go in and out of that location. I'm sure there's some nosy people that notice every vehicle that leaves. I can almost guarantee it. I know that there's a lot of college kids, but that doesn't mean that there's not older college kids that have that grandma mentality. You know what I mean? I'm just like, okay, or maybe not. I could be wrong. I don't get on here and claim that everything that I say is going to solve this crime because I don't even think half or a quarter of what I say is going to, is going to solve this. But then the one part that I can never get over is as he's leaving one of those times going around Queen Road Apartments, it says in the PCA, he pulls off as it's to almost pull into the driveway and has to back up and get back on Queen Road. That part right there always puzzled me. It's almost like he was in such a rush, or maybe he can't see very good when he drives. Maybe his contacts were foggy or something. I mean, I think the dude wears contact because, I mean, if you have any kind of eye problem or ever had eye problems, you're going to need some kind of corrective lenses. That's never been stated or said, so don't come at me. But you know, he he missed that turn and ended up almost in the driveway. Had to back out and then go back down and make the 3-point turn. Of all those times that you're circling around these streets, why the hell did you make the 3-point turn at that point? Why not just go circle around one more time and then come up and park? But no, it was almost like a flamboyant move. It's almost like I am so sure that nobody's around or nobody sees me that I can make this 3-point turn right here in the middle where it's nice and lit up and I can go back down and nobody's going to see me. You know what I mean? The dumpster video does show quite a bit. It really does. But you really don't see anything but other than another white vehicle picking up some dude. And we all know that that's not the Elantra. There's no need to waste time on that video. We see a dude walking up the street, lighting a cigarette or flipping open their cell phone, whichever one you want it to be. You know? Had anyone heard anything about Justin that had the wild theories? He said he had proof he was Hannah Query's brother and Idaho was connected to her death and suicide. I hope to getting help. Yeah, I heard that very early on. Somebody was saying that it could have been her brother that retaliated due to her death. And I think there's a lot of creators that have been trying to push that. But I don't know how true that is. I really still do not know how true that is. But I do remember that. Do y'all believe, and this is as much as your chat as it is mine, do y'all believe that that white car that we saw next to the dumpster and the guy getting in, do you believe A, that was Brian Koberger, or B, that was a white Elantra that was being driven? Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. I'll wait. The question is, do you believe that was Brian Koberger getting into that car? And B, that car was a white Elantra pulling off? Okay, we have a neither. Tell me what y'all think, chat. Everybody has an opinion. I know y'all do. And another thing, do you believe that the DoorDash driver in that short time span, do you believe that the DoorDash driver could have seen Brian, White Elantra, or whoever's White Elantra that was, either in passing or going? Okay. they would see something. The neighbor said to 911, yeah, there was a man in their house last night. Yikes. I like this podcast because it's filled with common sense. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. YouTube, same here. Sometimes I see your thumbnails and makes me curious, but still can only handle 5 or 10 minutes. I agree with Jeff H. What did Jeff H say? Yeah, agreeing with him. What did he say? Let me scroll up. Oh, on a chalkboard? All right. So, I mean, there's been a lot of things. You know, we saw that man coming from Linda Lane, the 1320 camera. We saw the man, you know, going by the dumpster, walking by that up the hill, by the apartment building there, and then vanishing and never to be seen again, you know, so to speak. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't think he walked across the parking lot. I think he walked under, like along the car area. Part of me wondered if Brian didn't drive by and see the back of the DoorDash driver walking up to that house and realized he hadn't been seen that at that point. Otherwise, he might have picked another night. DD had to see him at one point, hopefully. Yeah, that's what I thought as well. I mean, I think the DD had to see him at one point, either coming or going. You know, coming or going. There has to be some kind of sighting. There was too much going on in that little short span of time, and there was a lot of things. There was a lot of cameras. And I mean, to be fair, the DoorDash driver had the camera more often than not. You know, the guy that almost got plowed, you know, can you imagine if he would have been hit? That would have been it. That would have been it for whoever's wider launcher that was. He would have been cooked, you know? He wanted to do it before he got new plates. I had that theory too, YouTube. I did. I thought, why not do it before you change your plates? I mean, that way you can always say, hey, I've always had these plates. But the police are going to look into that, you know, be like, nah, you had Pennsylvania plates. Come on, tell us the truth. We know you had Pennsylvania plates. Don't make us play hardball, Brian. Okay, I had Pennsylvania plates, but I only had one. Because in Pennsylvania, we aren't required, you know, front plate. And we don't have crosswalks. Yeah, we heard. You know what I mean? Yeah, we. Why wait for him to go back to Pennsylvania? Because you want to have physical evidence rather than circumstantial. It's always better to have physical evidence versus just circumstantial. I mean, if you can place somebody circumstantially somewhere, that could have been technically, you know, at that point, anybody. But to have that physical evidence, that DNA that showed him in the house, then that signed, sealed, and delivered, so to speak. You know what I mean? Despite on how they got it, you know, it was still physical evidence. Do you think he told his dad and that's why he flew there to drive home with them? That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. Because he supposedly, in the Dateline episode, he did have a conversation with the father for 54 minutes. So what are they talking about at this point in the morning? You know what I mean? I don't know what the time difference would be from Idaho to Pennsylvania. Is that like a couple of hours? You know what I mean? Like, And that's where the law comes in typically, is like we have to have the ability for a magistrate to sign an arrest warrant. They're the ones to make the ultimate decision. If they feel that you don't have enough probable cause against somebody, then they're not going to sign off for an arrest warrant. So that could have been a lot of it as well. You know, maybe they continued to have to add to this probable cause before the magistrate felt comfortable to sign off on it, you know? Well, I mean, they could have called him in and he could have played the role, you know. I'm just a TA and, you know, can you tell us anything about where you were at that time? You know, what are some of your habits? What's some of your recreational stuff? And that's probably where he would have been like, "Oh, I like to go for late night drives and stargaze and go for hikes and runs and but I'm usually alone, so there's nobody to really validate what I like to do." Um, which makes me wonder because I do a lot of stuff alone myself. And, you know, that's why I always make it a point to stop off and get candy bar, go to the bathroom, keep the plug and play going, having my location on, all this stuff. That way there's proof of where my location was and where I was. You know what I mean? It's always good to show your location, even if you don't want to. You know? Hey, Harlot, thank you for being here. Happy Memorial Day to everyone in the chat. I hope that you guys are having a pretty good weekend. Things are going well. And Bullets and Bling, I'm sorry about your dog. I hope they've gotten better since your post. I don't believe the IGG with the tip. I believe a family member. Well, do you, if we're going to go there, do you think that, yeah, I've thought that too. You know, do you believe that possibly more than one scenario could have got him caught? Like they said, also, you remember when they pulled the trash that there was a male DNA in there that was found that matched Brian. I remember reading that in a document. There was his sister's, there was Brian's, and then I think it was his dad's DNA that was found in that trash. So they would have had that trash DNA right there. So that one matched the one back in Moscow. Hey, you got 100% match there. You get what I'm saying? That goes back to me saying once again, he's a bad driver, obviously. I mean, if your driving is that bad, I would have asked my dad to drive, even though I don't trust his driving. And if you're watching, Dad, I love you. You drive well. I'm just saying that, I would have said, "Hey, you think you can drive? You think you can drive?" I get pulled over in Pullman. I get pulled over in Moscow. Hell, I've even gotten pulled over here in Indiana. It's not safe anywhere. And did y'all catch the little reference on the little meme that I did the other day where we was all tatted up with the Indiana jersey? Did y'all catch that? That's why I put that in there to see if anybody would catch the little correlation there. Um, YouTube says my dad would have taken the wheel after the first pullover. Yeah, my dad would have too. My dad would have too. He would have been like, "Nah, get your ass over." But have you ever asked yourself this question? If you look at the map from Pullman to Pennsylvania, where they were going, the Poconos Mountains, it's a straight shot. At least it looks like on the map. But Brian insisted that they go south all the way down to almost Colorado and then over, heading east. Because that's where they caught his license plate on a license plate reader heading east. Supposedly the FBI had lost his vehicle up until that point. So do you ever wonder what made him want to go so far south and then over east? Because that seemed to add more miles and time to the trip. He was almost adamant about it. Y'all ever wonder why he would have had to do that? Yeah, he did. He did go the long route. What would it cost somebody to go such a long way out of the way when you can just take a straight shot? Not that it's not right. You're able to drive as you wish, but my parents would have been like, hell no, we're going the shortest way. I'm tired already. I shouldn't have had to fly out. You drove out here by yourself. Did we ever find out if Dad drove out with him? Is that when he was, circulating new friends for Brian and then flew back to Pennsylvania? I assume Dad flew out the first time, but I guess it sounds like they took off from Pennsylvania. Dad drove out with him. He's sitting there trying to get Brian some friends and then flies back. So this time he flies out and then drives back with Brian. My parents are elder. They're elderly. They would do that for me if I asked them, and I'm no kid by no means. Would your parents had any reason to have flown out and drive back with you cross country? I thought that too, PKC, but I don't remember. I mean, it was so early on that happened. I was like, I know Dad was around though when he was moving in because he was soliciting him some friends. But I didn't know if he flew out. I didn't know if he drove out with him and then flew back. But think of my question. Would there be a reason? What would make Dad have to fly out and then drive back with his 28-year-old son? Any suggestions in the chat? The whole idea of driving 2,800 miles for a winter break is insane. Get the damn ass on a plane like a normal. Yeah. That's what my parents would have said. They're like, you're not driving. Get your ass on a plane. Safety? What kind of safety, though? He's 28 years old. I've driven all over without people in my vehicle at 28. Unless he didn't have the money to stop and get adequate hotels. You know what I mean? Then I can see it. I can see it. But still, that's a long ass drive. And his dad looked like he was exhausted. Did she let you go with her, though? Did she let you go with her typically? Could this whole notion of driving long distances be part of the whole plan from the start? Pretend I don't like to fly so that when I drive my suspect vehicle out of the area. I don't know, Jeff. I don't know. Someone did a video that drove cross country like that, and they say it's a long and boring as hell. I would say so. I mean, a lot of drives like that, unless you're going through mountains and, over rivers and all that stuff. I mean, most of the U.S. is a pretty boring ass drive. I drove up from Florida to New Jersey with my daughter for her residency. Okay. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything, you know, unsettling about the drive. I'm just wondering what would it cost them to do it twice? Like I can see the first time you're gonna go get settled in, you're kind of nervous, you're going to a new school. How come mom didn't go? You know what I mean? You would have thought mom would have been the one that wanted to go, not dad. It'd been my mom. She'd been like, "Oh, I want to go. I want to go." And then, they do everything together. So my dad would have been forced to go. But mom didn't even go. And that's awesome. You get what I'm saying? It's like mom didn't seem to have a lot of interaction as we've seen. We're gonna go get Thai food. Yeah, that's it. There's no Thai food like the Thai food in Indiana, I tell you. Just think if he would have mentioned that Thai food restaurant, boy, that would have been some hell of a freaking advertisement right there. We not only serve Thai food, we serve the Thai food that Brian Koberger loves. I wonder if they bought anything in Indiana or stayed or stopped in Indiana. What did they do in Indiana? That's interesting, Farah, because I think that they found a hotel key in his car as evidence later on when, they were going through his car. I believe they found a hotel key, but it makes you wonder, like, did they just stay at one hotel the whole drive? Like, we're going to drive 20 hours, stay at a hotel, sleep for about 6 hours, get up and keep on driving. I mean, I've known people like that. My dad is kind of like that. It's like, I don't want to spend a lot of money. And I don't know why it's like that, but that's just who he is, and you're like, man, you want to do this all in one day and shit, It's like, Jesus. And what the hell is Thai food anyways? I can almost see the southern route considering the time of year. Montana and North Dakota, sometime close to the interstate during bad weather. Yeah, that's a point. Probably at least 2 nights in a hotel. Good afternoon, Aquarius. Happy Memorial Day. Glad you're here. It's but you have to wonder, it's like, I mean, I do see the reasoning, but they mentioned in the places that I've read that he was adamant. They almost got into, or they did get into a huge argument about the route they were going to take. So, I mean, that makes it sound like it's pretty damn important that we go this way, you know? These apparently was an expected winter storm coming to the north. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, these are just some questions I've always had, and I've never really, asked other people for their thoughts on it. I mean, I like to learn from other people. It's like document don't tell you this stuff. And it doesn't make it speculation either because I mean you're you're problem solving together, the best option available. Now if you would have told me, well, he could have boarded the Starship Enterprise in Pullman, got beamed up from Pullman and ended up in Indiana and then picked up his car and then got pulled over those 2 times from jet lag, could understand that. And instead of that being a real cop because the cop didn't want to show his face because he was a day walker, he that's why he pointed the camera at his shoot the whole time. Total sense. Okay, there is vegan Thai or animal products in Thai. And Texas says maybe they wanted to see Pikes Peak. I've never been there. We have a Thai restaurant up here called Pasara. They have something called Chicken Roma. Delicious chicken broccoli, carrots, and rice, and peanut sauce. That does sound pretty good. Pikes Peak is one hell of a side trip. I've had friends that have seen Pikes Peak. You know, they've talked about having to go up there on a train or something like that before. Like you take a train up there, and it's very, very close to the train is very close to the edge of the mountain. Like, man, people didn't care back in the day. They're just like, we got to get from point A to point B. I don't care how dangerous it is. Let's do it. Let's get it done. But it's interesting to think about his route of travel, you know? And here's another question for you guys that have been following this for a while. Do you remember if he got his car serviced once he got to Pennsylvania, his tires changed there, or he had his tires changed before he left Pullman? We drove up. It was scary as hell. I see. Me and the mountain don't get along. I was coming back home from St. Louis, and we were driving through. I think it was Eureka, Arkansas. Whatever area they have the Czech village that's into the side of the mountains. And man, that just made me tripped out. Like all those little homes and stuff. It just felt weird to me. I had to get off the mountain because I was getting all dizzy and everything and vertigo, all kinds of stuff. So I don't do well with mountains, you know? I traveled from North Dakota to Idaho around Thanksgiving many years ago. A storm was coming in. They warned the interstate could be closed for 3 days, so I could see a different route. Okay. I believe that once he got to Pennsylvania, he had the car service. Not sure about the tires. Okay, but I don't know how or why BK would know since he didn't travel through there before in the winter. Yeah, very, very true. I agree it was Pennsylvania. I drove the 14, 16-hour trip from Maine to North Carolina in one shot a few times. If you can't afford to rent a car when you get there, a hotel room's on the way. It's easier. Yeah. You know, I drove from Texas, West Texas to Florida at one point. I drove straight through. By the time I got there, I couldn't walk. I mean, I was like, yeah, nah, never again. Mickey says, I've been to Pikes Peak. Texas says, hell, I could be a mountain man. Not me, my brother, not me. You know, those long trips after a certain amount of time, I mean, people say, well, there's a reason why truckers have, log books and a substantial amount of time that they can drive because, after a while, sitting in a stationary position, your blood starts to clot, I believe, or some kind of gravity pull or something that messes up your whole thinking process. So it's easier to get into wrecks or your reaction time or whatever is not as quick. I remember early on after he was arrested, there was a story about some people that talked to Brian at the place he was near Pennsylvania, but I think that may have only been debunked. We did hear that, very early on, we were hearing that he was going around with gloves on everywhere he went, grocery stores and stuff in Pennsylvania. So I could understand that during the COVID or during the pandemic time, but I never see people, no matter how sick they appear, to be wearing gloves. I don't. Can y'all answer me that? Do y'all normally see people with gloves on at the grocery stores or anything like that? I mean, I see a lot more people with masks on these days than I do with gloves. No, I don't feel dizzy around Mount Mama. I'm glad she's here. It just makes me wonder about the severity of the gloves. Like, that would definitely stick out. Even if it was those clear gloves, I mean, you'd be like, well, what's wrong with this guy? How come he? But then when you see him in photos, you see his hands almost scrubbed to the skin. And the only other people that I've ever seen that have skin hands like that are nurses or doctors or clinicians that wash their hands all day long. They usually have those raw hands like that. And I used to have a grandma that had a nervous tick, and I've said this before, that she had a nervous obsessive tick. Whenever she'd get angry, she'd go into the bathroom and start scrubbing her hands, and she would scrub them until they were almost raw. And that would, I guess, calm her down. But I wonder if that's what he did, because you do notice his hands are really reddish, almost raw looking. Am I lying, or am I just seeing things in these photos? Let me know if you agree, or you think that's just the photo that's kind of messed up a little bit. I did wear gloves during the pandemic to the gas station. When I'd pump gas, I had those nitrate gloves in the glove box, and I'd put one on to grab the gas station handle. I did wear it during that. Could be OCD, just don't judge 100. Just can't judge. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that, in the photos, it does look like his hands are really reddish. Redded, you know. And I've worked in the medical field, early on. I was a certified nurse today, and you have to wash your hands in between every time that you change your gloves. So your hands start to peel and crack, and you gotta use a lot of lotion and sometimes Vaseline. When they had him in the red jumpsuit in Pennsylvania, his hands looked super red and inflamed. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. Yeah, like, I wouldn't say like washing dishes. There's a difference. Like, when you're scrubbing to get germs off your hands, that soap you even use has some different additives to kill germs on your hands when you're trying not to cross contaminate residents, because one resident might have something on in their stool, and if you don't wash your hands and you transfer it while you're cleaning another one, you could transfer communicable diseases to one from the other, you know what I mean? Or if there's a cut or something like that, I mean, it's very dangerous. That's why you have to wash your hands a lot. Yes, I was a nurse. You wash your hands a billion times a day. That's true. I mean, because there's so much that you can pass on to the next resident. You're going from one to the other. I have several autoimmune diseases, and my doctor just wants me to wear gloves and a mask when I go out. Just can't do it. I put on full armor of God and head out. It's the way to go. Yes, several pics of BK's hands appear. He scrubs constantly. I've always wondered that, though. I wondered if that was nervousness, or if like I said about my grandma, if you're getting angry, you really don't want to show it. So you go and start washing your hands continuously. And what if you're using hot water because that's the only way in your head you believe that you're killing germs, which really is not true. Because some bacteria lives under heat, it grows through heat. So, we've always been told use hot water, use hot water. Sometimes it's not the best. Um, but these are just some things that I've been thinking lately. And I know I started a little raw in the beginning, but like I said, sometimes people just aggravate me with their thoughts because they stand behind them and they get so angry and vicious towards other people that don't believe in them. And I believe that there's no need for it. There's no need for it. I know I called Jesse an idiot, and he'll probably see this and he'll probably have some clap back, but it's whatever. I don't really believe you're an idiot as a person. I believe you're an idiot as what you say on Dago's show. You know? But anyways, once they got to Pennsylvania, you know, it's where it all kind of went wild. The rest of them went back to Pullman, or not Pullman, Moscow. And then that's where we've been ever since until we got the trial moved to Ada County. What I do have to tell you guys is, all this mistrial stuff and all this all this stuff about mistrial, we haven't even gone to trial yet. So how could it be a mistrial? What I believe is if they do find the leaks, there's going to be some harsh sanctions, but those probably won't be implemented till after the trial even. And once the jury gets elected, they'll probably be sequestered, just like in the OJ trial, so that none of this stuff has any ability to determine or have any kind of issues from here on out. And I believe that's what's going to happen. I don't believe that we're going to get an instantaneous, well, we're going to sanction these people, we're going to sanction those people, until after the trial. And I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say this till the end. It's in the jury's hands at this point. So from here on out, all these things that you're going to be hearing in these lives, and I understand people enjoyed listening to the latest information, and that's awesome. That's awesome to hear. We all want to know, but do understand it. From here on out, there's really not going to be anything of substance until the actual trial, and then it's really not going to be, you know, relevant until the jury hand down a verdict. We're getting to that point where it's all in the jury's hands. The attorneys can put on a good presentation, both sides, but the jury it's going to be in their hands. That's a good question. Does anyone think Hitler will remove the death penalty? I saw a person walking their dog in front of that house, Jeff. Do y'all believe Hitler will remove the death penalty? That's the next question we have at this point. Can y'all answer that for Firefly? Do you believe that Hitler will remove the death penalty? I believe that all those things will probably be ironed out in the penalty phase. If there is any kind of sanctions, they will be dealt with in the penalty phase. But I could be wrong. I hope, pray, I'm right, and that Hitler is a wise owl and can see through the defense and won't give delay or remove the death penalty. I don't know. I don't think AT is going to quit trying to get it removed until it's removed at trial or over. And that's her job, right? That's her job. And I mean, we can't blame her for doing the job that she obviously loves to do. We can't blame her. But at a particular point, you got to ask yourself, what makes these individuals, you know, ever want to be a defense lawyer? I know we need them, but what would make you say, you know what, I want to be a defense lawyer? Yeah, she's doing her job. Because she's not going to prison regardless, Even if her client is guilty, she's not going to be the one going to prison or going free. I don't believe, as much as people claim that they want to win or lose, I mean, I believe that they want to win each case, but a loss really does not have that much implication on a person as we give it, you know? Like people say, well, they want to win this case and she's going to do this and she's going to do that. Well, we really don't know who Ann Taylor is. But like I said in the last one that I did about this, I believe that they should have got a new attorney to help her out during this time. She lost her mother, and all this stuff that's going on. I mean, just losing your mother, she has to be grieving that. So can you imagine her grieving, Steve grieving, the other family's grieving? I mean, everybody's grieving during this period of this trial, but still the trial must go on. We can't wait forever. I mean, in all essence, this trial is just another murder trial. It's no more special than the OJ trial. It's no more special than a lot of the other high profile trials that we've seen. There's trials going on right now where people are fighting for their lives and they're still going on. P. Diddy, he got 12 jurors. And you tell me that Brian is more popular than P. Diddy? No way. You know what I mean? There's no way. There's no way that P. Diddy is less popular than Brian. So if P. Diddy could get 12 and alternates, I believe that Brian can get 12 and alternates. You get what I'm saying? Do y'all agree with that or disagree? What do y'all think about that? Do you think Diddy is more popular than Brian? I don't think so. I don't think Brian is more popular than Diddy. And Diddy got some jurors, so I believe that Brian can get some jurors as well. And regardless of what people think, I believe in the justice system, and I hope that a fair trial does commence, and the jury does its due diligence to find justice one way or the other. I agree with you on that one, Firefly. That one is worse to talk about than this trial. They're both heinous. It's hard to believe that these people have the capability to even be free. You know what I mean? But I don't think Diddy's gonna get free. You know? Yeah, they got their juries, so he'll get his. But I hope it wasn't a big inconvenience having me stream on my phone. I don't know how this is gonna turn out. I hope that you can hear it okay. I hope there's not a big delay. For those of you that were able to stay throughout the whole 2 hours, thank you so much for spending your Sunday with me. Hopefully, I'll be able to do this again soon. Y'all have a wonderful Memorial Day. Stay safe out there and spend some time with your loved ones because life is short. We never know when we're going to actually wake up one day, and the people that we take for granted sometimes are going to be gone forever. Well, y'all take care of each other and be safe. And let me see if I can find. There it is, the exit music. Maestro, cue that music. See you around.